Hello and welcome to the Things I See. My name is Clarity Ray, and today's episode is going to be about hand magic. But before we hop into all the hand magic and talking about what I see with all of that and how you can see stuff, I just want to talk about the new updates to the channel, the new border and the new intro animation and the new just updated logo. Same idea, but not to call myself out too hard, it was a little generic. And I realized I was putting a generic amount of care and detail and focus and love into this, and I wasn't being authentic because of it. And that needed to change, so I changed it. And I hope you enjoy. The black, white, and rainbow is a vibe I've been working with for well over a few years now, and it's my absolute favorite. I feel like it speaks from my heart. I feel like it opens up the authenticity I want to open up on this podcast and this channel. So for anyone who saw the old designs and seeing the new, thank you for sticking around through that first bit, that not trial run, but experimentation run. Thank you for making it to here. So, now that we're all here, I am excited to get this episode on the road, and I do want to give a quick disclaimer. If there is any information in this video that I learned from a different source, I will be sourcing it, but a lot of what I talk about on this podcast is energy experiences I've had purely on my own, things I've discovered or pulled from the ether. So without further ado, let's get started. So before we hop into any of the really wicked sick hand magic, I'm going to teach you a very quick and easy hand magic trick. So I learned this from a shaman. This is my citation. Awful citation. I learned this from a shaman I met just one night, and he said it was Eastern hand magic. Not sure what that entirely means, but this works incredibly well. So I'm here to teach it to you anyways. You want to point the hand you're trying to cleanse down towards the earth, trying to make sure it's in camera angle, and you want to take the other hand and just sweep it towards the earth. And you want to kind of have the visual in your mind as if you're swiping the dirt off of your hand and it hits that earth and just disperses. And that's the beauty of that. A lot of the things that aren't even just cleaning my hands, like full on taking energy from someone, like something they don't need, and I have to get rid of it because now it's in my hands. You can just swat it towards the earth. To the earth, it is just more energy. There's no good or bad because it's not taking the energy personally. So, first thing we do before doing this hand magic, clean our hands of all the random strangers' hands we've touched, all the random energies we've picked up. Just clean them off real quick. So now that we have these nice, clean, energy-free hands, we are going to go to trick number 1. This is definitely one of the first things I discovered. I originally discovered this December of last year, so 2023. And I want you to replicate this with me. You can do it with your eyes open or your eyes closed, but do understand, if eyes closed works better, work with that. In fact, I'm just going to guide it eyes closed. So before we close our eyes, I want you to place your hand out here like this, and I want you to grab an imaginary point in air as if you're sandwiching a wall of existence, like just pinching it. So as we have it pinched, I want you to draw an outline of your hand with your eye, like just visualize what it looks like. And when you close your eyes, I want you to imagine what that pinched hand looks like. Visualize or imagine, either one works. So what is in person is being replicated, and I want you to grab this point in space, and I want you to pull. And once you feel you've pulled it enough, I want you to then, after you've pulled it enough, to pull it one extra bit right here where you tighten it. It's super key to how it kind of forms. So, doing it again, we imagine this ball of energy in between our index finger and our thumb. We are grabbing it out of space itself, and I want you to imagine pulling it as far as it's willing to go, and then we tighten it from that point. And I want you to imagine that as we pull it out, a string forms, a chord. And this chord can be plucked. And this is where it gets magical. I happen to feel a pulse when I pluck this string. And I know people that hear it. They're able to hear the string itself. I just can feel the frequency of it and kind of get a vibe of what kind of sound it's making. And, you know, if you don't feel anything with it right away, all I ask is that you don't instantly discount this. I've met a lot of people who can feel it, and I've met some who can't yet. And that's a key thing I'd like to say. Yet. Always remain open-minded to what the world of energy is willing to open up to you, and when you're willing to open up to it more so. So we have the string, and this string is that little practice thing I showed you is exactly that. It's practice for what is a beautiful application. So just as I plucked that chord, there's this really cool interaction I was able to find where the chords people have on their physical body that are connected to other people and things, you can pluck those chords too. So not naming any names, there was this one lady who had a nephew, and I didn't know this lady for more than a day at this point, but she was complaining about her nephew. She was saying that she isn't held up. She doesn't care. She doesn't have emotions about it. She's not frustrated. But then she talks for about an hour about how very frustrated she is with her nephew. And she's saying she's drawing boundaries, but, you know, it sounds like she is talking about drawing boundaries. And I think to myself, why is it so difficult? You know, I don't have a full contextual view of this, just what she's telling me. And I look at the chord on her body of her and her nephew, and I energetically pluck it. And I hear ring off a message, and it was like a recital of a story of her side of the story, of why she can't let go. And it's because this was some of her only family left. Some of the only family she had access to, and she just wanted to make sure that she didn't lose access to it, because it was kind of her last opportunity to have it. And seeing that, it's like, oh, you know, and I had to physically hit the chord. But when you can get into a state of channeling people's energetic chords, you can pluck them and you can hear why that chord exists, why it won't go, why it will, what it's feeling, what the energy exchange is. It's all available, and all it requires is your hand and the ability to listen. The ability to listen won't always be clairaudience. Most of the time it'll be just trusting that you know. Trusting what is telling you you know, which is you. The higher source, whatever it may be. Tap into that shit. If anyone has seen chords before, I'd love to hear about any unique experiences with me. It's cool because there's chords of different sizes. There's some chords that are this big, some that are like this big, and some that are cobwebs. Our ears have a giant cobweb mess of energy. But then, like around our heart, around certain areas of our back, there's going to be massive motherfucking chords. And these massive chords require bigger cord cutting knives to cut is the interesting thing. Small ones work great for cobwebs, but eventually you need a really big, like, scythe kind of blade to get some of these cords. But the truth of all cords is just to pluck away, just with your hands. So I'm going to transition this onto transmutation shortly. I have one more cool little tidbit about the strings to add. So I've messed with different ways of doing this, but I'm just going to share the easiest version. You can grab 3 strings out of the air, and you can envision these 3 strings. And what you do is you start braiding them. You can even do it with your eyes closed. Right? And you can just start braiding these strings. And as you braid these strings, you are creating a new wire, a new cord. And you can put intention into each string, each criteria of what you're manifesting, each principle of what you seek to become. And as you braid them, eventually it gets to a point where you can now, just as before you tighten it, you tighten this braid. And you get to the end and you just pull it. And you keep pulling it from this point, and eventually you'll just feel the string kind of almost merge into one string. The strength of it binds. It just notches in place. And with that braided string, you can now play it. You can now have that experience. And every time I've done it, instead of just feeling like a bit of pulse, I'll get these like full body shakes where I literally do a body wave just from the sensation of plucking the string. And I feel this wave echoing through. So mess around with this string concept. It can be done to play a frequency in the energetic realm, or it can be done to manifest something, play something into existence. And it just takes braid and braid and braid and braid of that intent into one pluckable string. So now we're going to go on to a few other interactions with the hands, specifically within transmutation. So transmutation at its base core is moving energy from one person to another, creating a link for the energy to move. And my first transmutation experience was completely on accident. There was this girl when I was visiting Chicago. She was just having this sudden emotion come over her super intensely, and she was kind of having a bit of a breakdown. And it was just one of those intuitive moments. I was too young to have known what the hell was happening, but it just communicated in my brain, I am here to help this person. So I get down to their level, I crouch down, and I'm like, here, let me see your hands. And meanwhile, I'm kind of like typically touch avoidant. I was just like, let me see your hands. And I think I just guide her through some breaths. Nothing crazy. I'm not even sure if I guided her. I think I was just there. And eventually all of that energy just vanishes from her. And I happen to become manic. For me, it just turned into this form of energy. Just pure energy for me. Too much energy to some degree, but energy. And she straight up asked, like, what did you do? Like, I just felt it all go away. And that was such an unintentional act, but so intentional on an intuitive basis. It's hard to fully understand until I was able to replicate it, but it's still such an interesting feeling. You know, I'm so much better at seeing energy than feeling it in that regard, where I don't always feel it go through my body. I see it leave theirs and go into mine. But that's transmutation. The idea of just touching hands can transmit energy from one to the other. And that's one reason I brought up the cleansing of the hands. Each hand we touch absorb some other person's stuff unless we are super well protected, in which we probably won't like have to handshake them in the first place. But each bad interaction or bad thing we touch just sits on our hand. So that constant cleanse is super important as you open up your hands to doing energy work, transmutation, things like that. So with transmutation, I want to clear one myth really quick that I've found. I know that in like I believe it's yogic specifically, you can like rub your hands together or even just hold them in the air and you feel which one is colder and which one is warmer. Then you know you're giving and you're taking hand. But for the use of transmutation, both hands work. For the use of how things physically happen, both work. You know, there is an essence to positive and negative with the hand, specifically in how energy spirals. It's like the positive side and the negative side need to line up in a certain way to be compatible. So one is positive, one is negative. There's a loop that happens in your body when you do mudra. When you do any hand signs in a meditative state, it's creating this circuit. And when you do these positions with that intent, the energy draws in between them to complete the circuit. So there is an inherent flow of positive and negative give and take, but always know that those are not end-all be-alls of something's function. You can transmute with your right hand, you can transmute with your left. It really is what feels right. And at the core of everything, we must ask ourselves, does this feel right? That is what's most important. Does this feel like what I'm supposed to be doing with this? You know, and if anything I'm teaching you, you get an intuitive vibe to do it a bit differently, don't listen to me. Do it a bit differently. That's how it's supposed to be. Absolutely. These are a lot of things I've discovered from my own practice. Again, like with the plus and minus thing, no one told me that. I just kind of started experimenting with it, and it's become a big player in how I do other magics. So transmutation, pretty straightforward. It's being able to move the energy, and transmutation becomes a skill when you start doing internal alchemy. When you start walking through your own energy system and start moving energy around is when you can reach onto someone else's body and move the energy in their body. Like, do you realize how major that is? Because you can't make them, but if they're not aware how much of it is making them, stuff like that, like we are making major shifts in someone else's alchemy with transmutation. And as long as they're fully up for it, it's going to work. There's going to be some exchange that you can start messing with. But all of that exchange comes with practice from internal alchemy. So always start on that internal good stuff. So we have transmutation off the list. The next thing is interacting with energy like matter, like it's moldable. So I'm sure many of you have heard of the good old-fashioned rub your hands together and then hold out a ball of energy, right? So in Taoist practice, they want you to like round out your shoulders, really arch your whole body to create that full body circuit and a clean flow for the whole body circuit. And it creates almost this ring, this field, this area of energy rather than just this ball. And the cool thing is you can hold this ball, but you can do a lot of other things with it too. You can pluck at it, you can pucker it, you can push it, try to push it. And that's where the fun starts. You find the limitations of how energy moves with just your hands. Energy has rules. It's not the same energy as matter, but it's not. And that's the beauty of it. It has its own set of rules of how it interacts because of its binding to matter. Despite its freedom, it's still bound to something. So, if you ever feel like there's something in or on your body energetically, instead of just, for example, swiping off the hands, you can fully imagine like a cloth over their hands, and you're just pulling that cloth off and pulling all that energy off the hand. And with that, you can sweep it towards the earth. And from this, you can work on other people's bodies once you have enough alchemy experience, healing experience, knowing what you're doing, being trusted, all of that. You can find points of energy that do not need to be there, and you can just yoink them out. Literally, I have pulled so much bizarre stuff from people's bodies. Some of the energy forms into these like entities, into almost like creatures inside of them. Some of these energies are not supposed to be there, but they can all be pulled out with your hands. It's beautiful. You can just use your hand. And a lot of people don't realize just how powerful a hand is. Our own body is this miraculously powerful on the metaphysical realm. That it's doing all these things I've showed you and much, much more. One time I could feel during an alchemy reading with someone, they had this resistance up around their ears, and it was specifically their right ear. Is their right ear, and I reached over and I pulled it out, and my whole hand was shaking with this thing, and they full on hit sob mode. I was almost crying from how it felt, and swiped it off towards the earth. And there's so many things that people probably pick up on that they're like, oh, that feels energetic, and then they don't do anything about it. But all you have to do is use your hands. That's the beauty of it. Trust in it and just do it. Move it. Be the thing that makes the change. We can change energy, and it's beautiful. And I do want to bring up a little note on how this and transmutation can be a little similar, where a lot of the time when you're pulling something out of someone's body, I've noticed energy forms in pockets in people's bodies. It's like it likes to hide in, like, outer energy likes to hide in your channels. It likes to, like, one time I saw a snake from someone's left arm to their heart and into a valve, and it was like hiding. We have trauma that embeds itself in our body kind of in these pockets away, so it can hide and only be released from the top. You know, it's a way to help the body manage it. All of this can be pulled and moved and all of that, but with transmutation, sometimes things don't want to move. Be careful what you're passing through your own body is the big disclaimer I have to give. Sometimes you only want to hold it and get rid of it. Sometimes it's not worth passing it through your body to turn it into something else. The body makes a terrible filter. It holds a lot of the garbage without being able to get it back out right away. The body is not the best filter for energy. So always be sure what you're passing through your body or what you're actually physically holding in a way, energetically holding. Okay, so talked a bit about all of those things, how you can just move energy with your hands. You can transmute through your body, and you can pull cords and pluck them, whether they exist already or not. And now goes on to some of my favorite hand magic. This is the stuff I've really, come up with. It's kind of like my baby to say I came up with this stuff. And you might not be able to replicate this, but I'm going to try a little experiment, and we're just going to see. So it works off of something called tutting. It is a form of dance I have done for 7 years, and it is based on drawing out geometry and the grid, which is just, the grid with your hands. And there is there's multiple things I've discovered I can do with energy in this grid space. So I start with something I call a grid key. So the cool thing about this is that it is exactly a 2x2 or a 2x1, right? So we have 2 spaces, and when I turn it, we now have all 4 of those spaces drawn out within this circle it traces. The crosshair and these 4 boxes. right? So to get this session started, I open up the grid. I turn the key to I imagine it as if there's one line, and this line swipes the grid into existence. From both ends that rotate, it just turns up and open and available. And it's important because I can close it. I can turn it off if I need to. While messing with energy, I can just push it away. I can be like, oh, too far. So we open up the grid. And within this now 4x4 right here, I'm going to draw out a specific shape from my fingertips. Right? So we start at the top and bottom. We trace here. Then we trace here. And as you see, it draws almost this star shape. And I'm holding it at the top. And this star shape right here between these two hands, its edge is right here, and I can just flick it. And you can just imagine this star shape spinning. And just like a top, but energetic, if I push it down, I feel this resistance build as the centrifugal force also builds. And I can keep pushing it down until that builds and it pushes back, and I let it. And you can just keep building up this energy, or you can keep compressing that centrifugal force, feeling it in the body. And you can get it to center, but I'm going to do an experiment. I want you to place your hands like this, person behind the camera. Or not behind the camera, person behind the screen. And I'm just going to pretend to hand it off through it. And I want you to hold it. I do this with people in person, but you know what? I fully believe this can work digitally. So I'm just gonna... And from there, press down to feel that top sensation. And of course, if you want to try to replicate this, you absolutely can. I can do it very easily because of my dance that I do, but you can even trace it out in different ways with your hands, just as long as you're tracing with that fingertips, with that intention, that beautiful star shape that you can hold at the top and spin. Now, a few other shapes I've messed with in this world. Funny enough, I haven't known squares to like working in this space. My entire dance style is squares, but there's almost a certain avoidance of energy with squares, where it's the corners, it's not about the squares, it's about the space in between them, but they fill in all space. A bit hard to explain, but squares tend to be resistant to energy, I've noticed, with this hand magic. But if you are to like draw out a circle, right? So here's the top, left, bottom, right. I have a circle, and then I hold it at the top, and I flick it, and then suddenly I have a ball of energy. And I've noticed that if I kind of just push the ball like that, it kind of rolls down. Like from a side point of view, it rolls like that. Almost as if it has one of those bowling alley easy bowls where you can just line it up and push the bowling ball, and it's a ramp. It does that, and I can push this ball and it'll find its way to the floor, and it will roll to wherever I pushed it. And I've messed around making these balls of energy where I can roll them at people. And I've gotten a few people to replicate these. I've gotten my niece to replicate these. It's been an absolute wonder to dive deeper into my very own geometric brand of hand magic. Ways you can actually tangibly mess with energy. And there's a few more advanced things I can do with this hand magic, where I can draw certain energetic channels into existence for cool geometric spell work. There's a lot of stuff I've done with it, but I'm going to cut it here for this podcast. Is just the basics, the getting started of hand magic. Just always remember, you can just do it with your hands. You don't need a special wand. Get a gem if it helps, but more likely than not, you don't even need a gem. You can just do it with your hands. Usually the gems work along great with it, but it's not entirely in the gem either. It's also in your hands. With power, with truth, with protection, with love. We can mess with energy to make our lives better and the lives of others. So, whatever this has taught you, whatever you were able to replicate, take that as a sign of your power. Take that power with you and make a difference energetically in the lives of your loved ones and the lives of those around you. Whatever you feel, whatever you see, work with it, feel it, pluck it, do something with it, and you will become that much more in tune. Thank you so much for tuning into this glorious episode of The Things I See. My name is Clarity Ray, and I say these things with light, with love, and with clarity. Thank you for watching, and have a blessed day.